welcome back. This is your feel-good breakfast show, Expresso, on SABC3. Now, in case you missed the big news of yesterday, let's catch you up a little bit. In a landmark ruling, the Supreme Court of Appeal overturned the culpable homicide conviction of Oscar Pistorius and instead found him guilty of the murder of Reeva Steenkamp. Now, Judge Eric Leach announced that the state's appeal in the Oscar Pistorius case was successful, and his final summary of judgment is thus.
In the result, on count 1 in the indictment, the accused ought to have been found guilty of murder on the basis that he had fired the fatal shots with criminal intent in the form of dolus eventualis. As a result of the errors of law referred to, and on a proper appraisal of the facts, he ought to have been convicted not of culpable homicide on that count, but of murder. The matter is referred back to the trial court to consider an appropriate sentence afresh in the light of the comments in this judgment.
And that was Judge Eric Leach there. Now, with Pistorius' conviction now converted to murder, he faces a possible minimum of 15 years in jail. And with us in studio to explain the judgment and what happens next is the chairperson of the Law Society's Criminal Law Committee, Mr. William Booth, who we're always thankful to have to advise us on these matters, sir.
Good morning.
So, having listened to that, once again, that word comes up, dolus eventualis. That was one of the things that was agreed upon by the five on the bench. That was the incorrect application of law. So, were you surprised by this at all? Because it's been back and forth that we've been talking about this for quite a while.
No, I wasn't surprised at all. I think the Supreme Court of Appeal were absolutely spot on. You know, they looked at the issue whether she misdirected herself, that is Judge Masipa, in applying this concept of dolus eventualis.
Yes.
And it's not something new. You know, the Supreme Court of Appeal has dealt with this in previous cases. And then they also looked at whether or not, using that concept, she interpreted the facts of the specific case properly, and they found not. And I think very briefly that is firing 4 shots with a heavy caliber handgun into a small little area, into a very tiny toilet, when you know somebody's behind that door. Does that amount to murder, that you acted intentionally, in terms of this concept of dolus eventualis?
So now the matter is being referred back to the High Court in Pretoria, and Oscar has already spent almost nearly a year in jail, if I have it correctly. So what factors are going to be taken into consideration when looking at his new sentencing, and when can we actually expect this new sentencing to take place?
You mentioned when we started about the whole issue of minimum sentencing in the period of 15 years.
Yes.
The court now has to consider whether there are substantial and compelling factors. That is mentioned in the minimum sentencing laws.
Okay.
And those will be, for example, you know, that his disability, and then all his personal circumstances have to be looked at, the fact that he's a first offender. But the court's got to balance a number of aspects, and that is his personal factors, the interests of society, the community out there, you know, their wishes, and the seriousness of the crime. So it's no longer culpable homicide, but it's murder. So those factors have got to be balanced. And it's a very difficult exercise to sentence anybody, because, you know, people out there are saying, well, he should be sentenced to 15 years. Others are saying, well, no, it should be 9 or 10. So the court's got to very carefully listen to all the evidence presented, legal argument, and come to a fair ruling on sentence.
What happens to him in the meantime, though? Does he stay at home while he waits the sentencing of the High Court in Pretoria, or does he stay in jail, go back to jail? What happens now?
Well, there seems to be a bit of confusion in this regard. I think the NPA are confused. Some legal people are confused as well. You know, if the conviction has been overturned, he's got to be resentenced. It can be argued, well, then, you know, his sentence as it is at the moment doesn't stand. Then he may have to be, he could even be warned to go back to court, or arrested, apply for bail. My feeling is, look, he's still serving a sentence, and he is under house arrest. So that should remain. I don't think one has to specifically arrest him again, bring him to court and have him apply bail. The registrar of the High Court in Pretoria now has to fix a date in conjunction with all the parties, the judge and his legal team, as well as the NPA, when the whole sentencing process will start. Possibly early in the new year, end of January, beginning of February, I would say.
And then finally, what does this mean for similar cases in the case of South African law, where a case like this does set a precedent going forward?
Yes, any case coming from the Supreme Court of Appeal does set a precedent. But as I said earlier, there have been a lot of cases dealing with this whole dolus eventualis. And I think one must stress, every case is different. The facts of each case are different. So you've got the law, you look at each case and look at the facts, and apply those facts to the law, or the law to the facts. But yes, it does set a precedent, and I think this case is going to certainly be referred to in future cases.
Yeah. Mr. William Booth, as always, thank you very much.
Thank you. Been great.
Right. Well, let's engage with you a little bit on Facebook. Expresso Morning Show, SABC3. The question we ask of you in regards to the Oscar Pistorius case is, are you satisfied with the decision to find Oscar Pistorius guilty of murder? Let us know and we'll read out all of your comments a little bit later on. Right now, let's catch up with the early morning headlines with Zoe.